Hello and welcome to the Empowered Couples Podcast, where here you get modern, non-boring relationship advice for you and your partner to communicate like pros, fight smarter, and stay on the same team no matter the challenge that you face. I am one of your hosts, Aaron Freeman.
And I'm Jocelyn Freeman, but you all just know us as the Freemans.
And today is about why some partners don't follow through and how that impacts the marriage.
Why we chose this topic? Well, just this last weekend, 2 days ago, we hosted our in-person couples workshop in Arizona. Couples traveled in from all over the US and even Canada. Thank you guys for making the flight to be here with us. And a lot of different themes show up. We walk couples through various exercises. Everyone's doing it privately at their table. And we walk around to provide support, interact, answer questions. And one that comes up every single, definitely workshop, but even sessions that we do with couples privately is, okay, Freemans, what happens if we talk about the thing, we make promises to each other, things we're going to do, not do, promises, changes to behavior, and then someone doesn't follow through.
And that was probably the most present as any workshop. This time, as I was working with one couple, that was the exact question that she had. We were actually walking through an exercise around communication, but there was a resistance there that I could feel for her to clarify some of the things we were asking to get clarified, because she said, he's just not going to make the change anyway. She said, we've been here before, I've made requests, and he says yes, and then it doesn't happen. And even as she started to say that, she started to tear up, and I could really tell how much this has been impacting her for many years. So maybe that's where we start. How does a lack of follow-through impact your partner and the marriage? Well, I guess logically it's that it erodes trust. And as I was interacting with this couple, I could also just see that she was very discouraged. Maybe you would say defeated. She did feel almost at a loss that she has really done all that she can, and was feeling as if she was faced with this moment where, there wasn't anything else she could do. And she was really asking for help. Like, how do I get him to follow through? Now, before you start to think that this is all about husbands and they don't follow through, this would just happen to be the couple I was interacting with.
But it definitely applies to both partners, like both men and women. The follow through or lack thereof impacts the marriage.
And getting back to that logical standpoint, basically trust and security, it comes down to that where you give your word and whether you follow through on that word or not. That's really the only thing that builds trust in a marriage. So when you make promises, you make it seem like you're making a promise. We'll talk more about compliance here today. Or just a general positive intention to follow through, and then it just doesn't happen. We'll cover more of these reasons, but that's the impact. The impact is a slow erosion of trust and discouragement, even defeat on the side of the partner who feels that they're the one getting the short stick.
A good visual to think about this, a couple years ago, we did this reel where we portrayed the impact of a lack of follow through on big or small things using Jenga, right? So if you know Jenga, stacked blocks, right? And when you're playing with someone, you each take turns kind of pushing one out, and then eventually you're waiting for it to crumble and fall over. So in the video, I'm portraying that you can think, oh, this is a small thing I didn't do, Freeman. Sure, I told my partner I would do that or I wouldn't do that. It's not a big deal. But I showed that they add up, and if you push out enough of the blocks using the Jenga visual, it eventually does crumble. And that's a good way to think about how you can't measure whether something is a small thing, like this shouldn't be a big deal to my partner, it shouldn't be a problem that I don't keep this promise. Maybe there's 1 out of 1,000, right? We're not saying that you are just this perfect human being and there's never maybe one tiny thing that you forget to do, but it adds up. So if you start to say, oh, well, I didn't do one today, and then No, didn't do another one the next day, over and over again. All of a sudden, it's going to crumble. Like there is a breaking point where the foundation cannot hold the structure. Same thing with your partnership. That word trust, right, is like there will eventually be a fracture so big that it feels like you can't uphold the relationship, like it's weaker.
Mm-hmm. Let's start going through then some of the reasons why this happens. And it's rarely intentional that one partner is making all these promises and, within their own mind, I'm thinking, I'm not going to do that. So it's not that intentional. It's not malicious. So we really got to look at some of these reasons because, following through and building trust is just literally so fundamental to a successful relationship. So let's see if we can't provide some and shed some light on some of these areas so that together you both can just notice some areas where, I didn't realize that that was a place where I wasn't following through. Ultimately, so that you not just begin to strengthen, but really fortify your marriage. And this is just such a primary way to do it. Let's go with the first way. And one reason why a partner doesn't follow through is that we'll go with the more avoidant one here first, is that you are saying yes primarily to move on from a conversation that you don't want to be in. So we are calling this complying. So complying is pretty much nodding your head, giving the appearance of a yes or of agreement. Yeah, I understand. Sure, I'll do that. And it's primarily because you're in a conversation where there is tension, there is upset. Maybe you're in a full conflict, but it has that feeling and that emotion in it to where that one partner just wants to be past this. And so rather than ask clarifying questions and doing some of the other things we're going to talk about, it's just the quickest, okay, yes, I understand. All right, can we move on? And it's clear that you're not actually making any commitment to either understand or actually follow through on the request or the thing that your partner is asking for change around. And you're just complying. And every time you comply, there's no basis for you to follow through. So, of course, you don't.
I think what you just described is definitely a common kind of, I guess, behavior, personality. But I also think that separate from maybe like the avoidant tendencies, there's also just the people pleasing tendencies, right? That like some people just want to please, pacify.
That's true, yeah.
Like you said, kind of move on, like let's not rock the boat. I don't want to upset that person. So I'll say yes in the moment, which is still the compliance point you're bringing up, but almost from a different place.
Yeah.
And here's the thing. I was also really thinking about this, and I encourage you all listening to really reflect on what was reinforced for you growing up. Specifically, was integrity emphasized? Did your parents model the power of what you promise, keeping it, acknowledging the impact when you don't keep it? And I really wonder that. Like, take a moment, think about that. If you've never talked to your partner about that, that'd be a great conversation to have, because this is something we are very conscientious of. So shortly before I met Aaron, I went through this hardcore leadership program. I mean, it was kind of boot camp style. It was so profound and powerful. It was very immersive. It took a lot of hours every week. And one of the biggest things they really instilled was integrity. So thankfully, before I met Aaron, I was kind of like all about integrity, so focused on it. But if I look back growing up, that was not emphasized for me. So that's why it was so revolutionary. I used to definitely say yes to please friends. I would say yes, even do things I didn't even feel right about, but I definitely would be avoidant of like certain promises I'm not going to keep, and I would let my feelings take over. So, Aaron, question for you. Do you recall integrity being emphasized for you growing up?
Mm-hmm. Well, this is a good question. And it also depends on how someone's going to define integrity. We did a podcast previously where we dove more into the aspects of integrity, but I grew up in a Christian household, Christian school, Christian church all the time. And so doing explicitly what you said you were going to do, yes, that level of integrity was emphasized.
Mm-hmm.
That you don't lie, that if you make a very explicit promise, that you kept that promise. And so that existed in the realms of being on time. Even as I got older, it was more like, oh, you have to pay bills at a certain time. So it was all the very logical, explicit places where I said, this is what I'll do. Like, I'll go to work, I'll show up to work, I'll do a good job. Like, all of those very clean, clear things. What I didn't have integrity was very much what you just said, like around the places where I was just being agreeable.
Mm.
I would say yes to friends that wanted to do certain things. And if it felt as if it wasn't that important, that we weren't making a really hard and fast plan, I might say, oh, yeah, sure. And know full well that I wasn't planning on doing that.
Interesting. Okay. So I really like that you went into the nuances there. And just last kind of connection I'll make to this before we go to the next point. This is something we are really passionate about. I guess maybe even me more so, about really modeling for our daughter. And I'll even weave it into our conversations. And I've been doing this. I mean, she's 4 now, but I think even starting at 3, or really when she really started to be able to have a little bit more of an interaction, of giving her, like, if I say, okay, yes, I will do that, I even will tell her, hey, I'm promising. Or if I can't promise, if I'll say, hey, I'm not sure, honey, so I don't want to give you a promise yet. Let me think about that or talk about that with dad. And I also do reiterate, if I am following through on something, I will say, hey, I'm doing this because you remember I said I promised I would. Because I'm trying to help her brain really absorb that principle. And I know it's working, because even just last week, she said very explicitly to me, yes, mommy, I promise. And it's like, that is so powerful. Like, kids do absorb these lessons. And I'm trying to teach her about the impact of how it is great that when people can count on us and our promises versus when they can't. So for all of you who are parents, this lesson, this teaching happens starting very early. And I think that modeling integrity, the importance of our word with big or small things, is truly what sets us all apart from kind of the status quo, or kind of where people let themselves off the hook.
Yeah, and that's where the lines really start to get blurred. And so that's why we know that as we transition to these other points as to why partners don't follow through, it can start to get a little bit gray and there's some openness to interpretation. But that's what we want to take out.
Mm-hmm.
So, even for example, what you're saying with kids and our daughter, just think to yourself, when your child says, hey, can you play with me? And you're doing something else, like you're cooking or you're finishing work, how often do we say something like, oh, yes, in 5 minutes? And at a certain age, when they do have that time conceptualization, they know what 5 minutes is. And you actually didn't mean 5 minutes. You actually meant, let me finish what I'm doing. So then this time goes by and your child is keeping track of the time.
Sky does that too.
And is like, hey, where are you at? You said it was going to be 5 minutes. So we really want you to take that away, that are you being as intentional with your word as you could be? Because this is going to also impact your marriage as much as it is the modeling to your kids.
Yep.
And so just be more intentional. If you could say, oh, 5 minutes, or you could say, hey, I would love to play with you, and I do need to finish dinner or work. And so right after that.
Yep.
Just something like that. Because like you said, you want to model. So that really transitions us into the second point as to why some partners don't follow through. And it is that you plan to, but you didn't really think through the logistics or the structure or your schedule or your capacity to see if you would actually be able to follow through.
Yeah, I see this as a really common one that people do, not even from a bad place, right? Is like, we want to usually make people happy. So maybe you even do this in the workplace, but again, we're focused on your home, your marriage. Is it's like, okay, yeah, I'll totally do that today. And you have the intention, like your heart's there, you want to do it, but you didn't look at your schedule. You don't really know what's on your plate. And here's the thing, right? Is like, even though you weren't coming from a bad place, there still becomes a negative impact when you don't actually follow through. And so I think that is, again, a big thing that leadership program instilled in me was, hey, before you give your word to something, check and make sure that you have the capacity for it, the time, the structure. So I live by my reminders. Like, even between you and I, if you ask me to do something, I mean, let's say cancel one of the, like,
Oh,
Disney
yeah, that's
Plus,
good.
right? The other day, right? To cancel something like that, or call a life insurance company, something like that. If I just said, yeah, totally. Yeah, I will today. If I do not put in a calendar reminder, I will likely forget, and not out of bad intention, right? It's like, I wanted to do that. I wanted to say yes. I have to have the reminders. And so for you listening, think about what structure you can put in place to keep the promises, because you can't just rely on your memory. I think that's one of the faults, is like, we think,
Mm,
oh, yeah, I'll remember. And I put anything, if I make a promise to a friend, a family member, to you, if I know I have something coming up and there's a deadline, I live by those calendar reminders.
yeah, calendar reminders or those tasks lists like Todoist or the notes one, on your phone,
Mm-hmm.
or I think it's called lists even. So really putting that in there and also having the habit of checking those and marking them as complete, setting them as a time. So let's move to the third one, because the third one is also related to these, and you can see how there is similarity. The third one is, one other reason you don't follow through is because you and your partner actually have mismatched priority levels.
Mm-hmm.
So where the one we just covered is, you don't really check to see if you have the mental, emotional, or structural capacity, like in your calendar, or the structure to remind yourself. This one is, you might say yes, and your example was good. I ask you to call this insurance company back and get a couple of information things that they need. And you say, yes, I'll do that. Now, what is the level of priority here, though?
Right.
When I make the request, in that regard, it's maybe a level 1 or level 2. I'm really needing this done like today.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're not saying this from a place of not planning on following through, but just notice that when you mentally organize your tasks, oh, call the insurance company back, where does that fall for Jocelyn?
Mm-hmm.
Level 7, right? Because you're going to plan a podcast, we're going to make a video, you want to spend time with Sky, our daughter. There's even making dinner. There's like basically everything that Jocelyn would normally do in her day are all higher priority levels than to pause and make calling back an insurance agent a priority.
And that's why it helps so much. This is in our communication, and something we suggest for you guys is really express the urgency level to each other. Like, if you're going to ask the other person to do something, then express how important it is to you. Maybe even, if it's helpful, give them some context as to why. That was another thing I was noticing in an interaction with the couple in person this weekend at the workshop and it was a huge aha for this one couple I was working with, where I said, I'm hearing there's like a disconnect on understanding why something is so important to each other.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you guys are kind of staying at the surface level, and then you get frustrated with each other because you either, don't do it, or, don't agree. I said, I think you could expand on the deeper, and maybe it's not always deep, but why it's important to you.
Mm-hmm.
And so, for example, if Aaron came to me and he said, hey, it would really give me some relief if you could call this insurance company, because I know we have like our annual
Mm-hmm.
review coming up, right? Or that we can either increase our rate or decrease
Yeah,
our
smart.
rate. And so that would just give me some relief knowing that's done. Okay, now I know it's not just about getting a task done. It's helping give him some relief emotionally, and that we have this review coming up, right? This annual, I'm trying to think of the word.
No, that was right. Like enrollment
Yes,
period,
that's it.
expiration, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And this is where number 2 and number 3 are very much correlated. If you understand the level of priority, then you might have to go back to see if you have the structure and the time in place. Because again, Jocelyn could say yes. And let's walk through this, right? First level was she wasn't just complying, so she was committed to doing it. Okay, so that was the first one. Second one is, do you have the structure in place to remember and follow through?
Like, yeah, oh yeah, I have time today.
hmm Well, let's even go further back. You would think, oh, I have time this week.
Mm-hmm.
That leads us to this level, which is priority. Now, when I ask you, hey, can you call them back? If that's a level 7, all of a sudden from the previous one, yeah, you have a whole week to get that done. So yes and yes, so check that off. But now that you realize that's a level 1 or 2 for me, now, okay, you can say yes, but is there something that we're going to have to negotiate, or are you going to have to adjust something now to see that you have the structure to make this a higher level 1 than what you were assuming it could be for you
Yeah,
to follow through?
absolutely. Now, I want to bring in, because I know some of the examples we've given have been kind of very practical things like getting a task done, calling an insurance
Mm,
company, being on time. I want to make sure this doesn't just apply to practical or task based things. This also applies to promises that you make to each other about, you know, it could be planning more quality time together. It could be putting more effort into pursuing each other, to keeping the spark alive. So, for example, if you guys have a check in, because you follow our weekly family meeting guide, right? And you're having these weekly check ins, and one of you says, hey, like I feel like we could prioritize our connection more. We've been so busy. I would really love it if we took turns planning dates, like so it's not all on one person. What if every 2 weeks we take turns planning the date? And then you go, oh, yeah, great idea. Let's do that. If you don't do it and you think, oh, okay, well, we've been busy. Come on, give me some slack. The thing is that has an emotional meaning to the other person. Like, my brain could easily say, if you didn't follow through on that, that makes me feel like it doesn't matter to you.
mhm.
And to me, getting quality time and staying connected really means something. And I want that to be important to you too. Like, I want our relationship to be just as important as you going to play golf with your friends, which you have no problem scheduling. I know some of you are going, yes, exactly,
You always
right?
make sure you follow through on that one.
Right. You definitely follow through on scheduling time with your friends, your hobbies. And so it's very easy if you do make promises to each other about, relationship oriented activities, prioritizing each other, putting more effort into affection, that if you don't do it, it's very easy to start to think it must not matter to them.
hmm
And that is going to really sting.
Yeah, it's important to realize that you do need to make the needs of your partner important because they're important to them. So you can't just let yourself off the hook by saying, oh, well, the quality time or the affection, the understanding that my partner was asking for, well, it's not that important to me. It doesn't matter. It's about what level of importance was it or is it to your partner.
Mm-hmm.
And because something is important to them, like then you make it a higher priority. Doesn't mean you make it maybe your single highest priority main purpose in life, but it should signal to you to make that a higher level priority, certainly over the functional things.
Yes.
I can see how these are all very related, so I also see why the follow through can be sometimes complicated. Because as we talk about the emotional needs that can be expressed, like in a family meeting, like in a moment where there is tension and a partner says something like, honestly, I just don't feel like I'm understood, or I feel that there's an imbalance. The way that you expect me to listen to you is not the same you show up for me. And it's unfair. Like, I really
Mm.
need you to try and understand where I'm coming from.
Which you have said that to me recently, by the way.
Yeah. Now, one of the issues might be that that request becomes too vague.
Mm.
And I get that in, again, the heat of the moment, you're sometimes wanting to reduce the tension. So there is this tendency to comply, but you can also be saying yes to something that you both have different interpretations to. And it's because it was too vague. So if I say to you, look, I really need to be feeling more understood by you. And you're like, okay, I get it. It is important. I see it's a high priority level for you. I'll make it that for myself. So you're checking off 1, 2, and 3 here. However, what do we both mean by that?
Yeah.
So in your own mind, how you're going to have me feel understood can be very different from what I'm meaning.
Yes.
So this can relate to those emotional expressions of, I want to be more understood.
More affection.
I want
more
to feel more
quality time.
prioritized, more cared for. I want to feel there's more desire, more wanting, more passion. If you just, and I know people kind of fight to get down to the specifics, like get detailed, because you think for some reason it's too businesslike. It has to be. I mean, then what else are you going to take an action on? The answer is nothing. There's no other way to get around this. I mean, you have to get specific. How could I make you feel more understood, more cared for, more prioritized, and really have your partner detail that out?
Yeah.
Because there's no other way that you follow through on it. And then it's worse because your partner had expressed such a deep emotional need to you, like being understood, being cared for, and then in your own mind, you did it in your way. But this next time that another event shows up, it didn't match their expectation. Right. So now you're in this battle between, yes, I did. No, you didn't. You see the trap that this gets you in?
Absolutely. And that's why we always coach couples to ask clarifying questions, like making sure there's no gray area. So if if your partner expresses something is important to them, whether it's a very tangible, practical task, or it's an emotional need that they're requesting or a change in pattern behavior, making sure you ask some clarifying question like, hey, can you give me some more insight into what that looks like for you on a day-to-day basis? Like, what would be some examples of how that looks, what you notice? Number one, you asking a clarifying question like that will show your partner that you truly are trying to get it, to understand. And you're not just like, yeah, whatever. Like, but, let's just get past this conversation. So that's huge. And then number two, it does just make sure that you guys don't define things differently. Because that was another aha for a couple this weekend was they said, wow, I'm realizing through this exercise that we have been using what we think are the same words, but we mean different things. And so by going into more of that detail, spending enough time without like ping pong, we always describe couples as like they're ping ponging back and forth so fast. They are not actually registering what the other person says. They actually did not hear what they meant. And they're not even really clear on the same words. And so slowing it down, making sure, hey, I want to make sure we're really on the same page about the terms that we're using, the words, that it's not, okay, maybe not that.
Yeah, I can see a few people starting to get a little lost, like, oh, I have to get a dictionary out for you?
No, I just mean make sure it's not vague.
So here's the last part I want to get to. Look. You don't get around. You have to make it clear. Like, yes. I'm tired of hearing anyone else really resist giving an example. Now, one thing about that is an answer is also, we're not going to accept the answer of you telling them what to stop doing. So like at the workshop, I had another couple and the guy was saying, I want to be more encouraged or supported. And we're like, okay, give an example. He's like, I don't know. I don't have an example. Just don't criticize me. It's like, no, that's not good enough. He's like, well, I can't think of one. It's like, all right, go back to that scenario. And I didn't have this much passion. I was empathetic. But I said, all right, go back to the moment. Kind of tell me what you felt was critical. Now, what could she have done different that would have had you feel supported and encouraged rather than criticized? It's like, just turn the coin over from heads to tails. You have to give the example.
Yeah.
Now, well, maybe we're getting too deep here, but I do want to just get all these nuances. Okay, with that being said, we're not telling you that you need to be in this business partnership with the dictionary out to define every word.
Hold on, let me make sure I understand the word that you're using correctly. 1 second.
But you start with the specificity. You need to give your partner an example, some direction, so that they say, okay, I know exactly how to follow through on this. And then they do.
Mm-hmm.
Why? Because when they do, that builds trust. Now, what we're inviting the other partner into is keep following through on that, but then just keep in mind the broader need. If the need is to be understood, and what you asked of them was, hey, when I say I'm not feeling understood, I'm wanting to use a tool like active listening, that you be the active listener for me. That could be the one example you gave them.
Mm-hmm.
But now, because you're a partner that cares to meet that need, now you're following through on that, but you also look more broadly. Okay, it's clear that feeling prioritized, cared for, understood, respected, loved, and pick the specific one that your partner said to you. It's clear that's important to them. They gave me an example. Okay, I'm following through on that. Now, in my day to day, let me start to intuit within our environment how else I could show that. Right. And that's many times what another partner is asking for. I don't just want you to only follow through on exactly what I said, because then it feels like I have to parent you. And it's like, I also want you to intuit
Mm-hmm.
how else that need could get met.
Yep. I love that. Okay, should we go to the fifth one?
Yeah, we really hit that one.
The fifth reason that partners don't follow through, or here's another pattern that can show up, is that it's short-lived, right? That maybe they do even start to follow through on the promise, because maybe it's something that's like is done more than once, but it's short-lived. And it's like, yo, what happened here? I mean, that lasted a few days. I mean, don't say that to each other. But that's what you're thinking, right? You're going, yo, what happened here? Like there was positive change for a few days, a few weeks, and then reverting to old ways or not keeping that up. So Aaron, do you want to describe a bit more as to kind of what's going on psychologically there?
Well, it is because it didn't make it to a new habit. So a few things. It might just be that you focus more on the functional things. And so you made the change your partner was requesting, and over a week or two, that made a difference. And then you just kind of fall back to just functioning. You fall back to what your own priority levels are, the things that you want to focus on. I mean, again, it's not like self-centered. It's just we all tend to focus on like ourself and the things that are the stimulus and responses within our own self. And then there's also just this idea of motivation. Motivation for change requires it to be beyond a certain threshold. You can have a lot of good ideas, and you may have lots of good ideas about how to have your marriage feel more connected, or starting a business, or a school and educational development for your kids. But how many ideas do any one of us have that we don't follow through on? Well, the question is, why don't you follow through? Well, you didn't have the motivation to. Well, what does that mean? It means you didn't actually value it enough to go beyond the status quo energy. All of us human beings, we operate on predictability and routine, and so that we don't have to exert as much mental energy. And that's a benefit. Like you don't have to be constantly thinking. And that's why we have, non-verbal, like kind of subconscious routines that we run, because you don't want to have to put top level executive functioning to every single decision you have to make. It's
impossible. I need to
impossible.
think about brushing my teeth. Hold on, let me think about this. No, you kind of just do that subconsciously.
Yeah, so there is a motivation threshold that you have to value that activity to push you beyond the routine. And because there's a short-term pain, meaning that your partner is bringing this up, it pushes the motivation and the value beyond the routine, because your partner's upset. You want to relieve the stress and tension, or you actually care to fulfill that for them, and that's all great. But as that need seems to be met, or the pain isn't being voiced, and I'm like doing this with my hand, like going down, then that level of value starts to dip below that threshold where now you're just back to operating on routine because you also didn't turn it into a habit.
And unfortunately, a lot of people are motivated by reaching a certain point of pain, which is sadly why a lot of people will finally become motivated in their marriage once their partner's at a breaking point. And I hope that you guys don't get there. It's okay if you do. There's support, there's tools. But I think it's really important that you listen to your partner's concerns well before a breaking point, right? You don't want to wait till they're like, I just cannot do it anymore. I am done. And now you're like, okay, I'll do those things. I'll plan the dates and
Mm.
I won't yell during arguments and I'll get the tasks done that I said I would. I'll do my chores.
I'll
That like
give you hugs and affection.
right, like now you're finally like, I will.
Don't leave me.
Right. Don't.
Sorry.
I mean, again, it's okay if you guys have been operating that way, but we hope that through our podcast and topics like this, you see you have to become motivated not by reaching that point of pain, but by
Mm.
taking what's important to your partner, the topics that you each bring up to each other in a weekly family meeting, which is proactive communication. And if a lot of you are going, wait, what's this weekly family meeting thing? We have an entire guide for that. You can actually get it one of two ways. You can get it as a separate resource, or you can actually get it as a bonus gift by signing up for our 30-day Prioritizing Us Couples Challenge, which we have had well over 50,000 couples do our 30-day couples challenges and love it. And you get that as a free gift, the family meeting guide. So that is just a huge, incredibly helpful but simple way to improve your communication. Make sure you guys are getting ahead of things, proactively communicating. So again, that's just a habit we really recommend. But going back to my point that you can't operate being motivated by reaching pain. You need to be motivated by what you aspire for in your
Mm.
relationship. Like, we're not trying to survive this thing. We're not trying to just hold it together. Let's be motivated by like being connected, by being this really great example of love for our kids, for our community, to break generational cycles, to be one of the extraordinary people out there. Because sadly, you brought up the phrase, Aaron, status quo. Sadly, the status quo can be like survival. And it's like, no, that's not what our podcast is about. Our podcast is about let's aspire for something greater, like being a truly happy, fulfilled, loving couple. And that takes work. It doesn't just happen magically. And that's why we cover so many topics in our episodes. But going back to the motivation point, like you have to think about, what am I motivated by? I don't want to be motivated by pain. I want to be motivated by a vision, something that inspires me. So I think that would be a great conversation to also have, is about that inspiration, motivation. What's the greater vision that you guys are working towards, that you can wake up each day and be like, yeah, we're not trying to survive marriage. We are creating an extraordinary partnership, something like that. So we'd encourage you to potentially re-listen to this episode, take notes, and really think about where your breakdowns happen in this, both maybe the inner things that you get blocked by, the things that happen between your communication, and focus on this, because like we said, it's huge. It is about trust, and trust is a huge part of the foundation of your partnership. By the way, if you're new here, make sure you hit subscribe so you can hear past and future episodes. If you take away value, make sure you give us a 5-star rating on whichever platform you're listening on. Write a review. We read every single one of the sentences that you guys write about our show. And go beyond our podcast. Like I mentioned, our 30-day couples challenge is one of the resources, our family meeting guide. I know we mentioned our couples workshop, which if you're like, wait, how do we go? We want to be in person with you guys. Make sure you're on the wait list to hear when we announce our next date. You can also get on the wait list to do a private session with us. We do review applications every week or two and send out invitations to people that we feel are the best fit that we can support. So make sure you're on there. All of those resources that we have can be found at meetthefreemans.com/links. So we really hope that you take away value from the show, and that all of our resources really give you the skills, the frameworks to implement this in your relationship, because It's about implementation, you guys. So with that, we've got so many great episodes coming up for you guys. We have a lot of exciting announcements, changes coming up, resources. So make sure that you stay plugged in. And with that, you guys, we will talk to you on the next episode.